Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm super excited today for this Focus RX podcast episode. So excited to have Melanie here. So I'm just going to turn it over. Melanie, if you could share any little intro about yourself, where you go to pharmacy school, your background, all of that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Melanie. I'm a P3 student at the University of Michigan. I went to UM for undergrad, came back again for grad school, just can't get enough, go blue. And I kind of decided I wanted to do an industry career, like end of my P1 year, beginning of P2 year. Didn't really have too much knowledge about it, but I joined IPHO and met a lot of upperclassmen who kind of gave me some really good insight into what the field actually entails, because our program doesn't really dive into a lot of industry things. So we're very clinical school. So having that industry knowledge really kind of opened my eyes to different horizons than what I had originally assumed when I joined pharmacy. So ever since then, I've just been on the track to industry, and hopefully we'll see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Thank you for that intro. I've always wanted to go to like a big state school. So definitely jealous. I have a lot of friends at Michigan. So
Nice.
it's a great school. But no, thank you so much for reaching out. I forget where you found me. Was it just on LinkedIn? Was it through one of the recent panels?
Yeah, it was through the IPHO Direct Path to Industry panel last week. So yeah, and like I heard you talk about your journey. I was like, wow, this is exactly kind of what I want to do. So I figured you would be a perfect resource to go to.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for tuning into that webinar. There's definitely great insight there. And I know that, to Judy and Jason, we three went to school together, and for us three to always have been interested in industry and to now be at a place where we're all entry level was definitely interesting. But I don't want to eat up too much of your time, and I know I want this to be about answering your questions and really for you to get as much insight from me that you can for whatever I have to kind of offer. So kind of go ahead, take it. And just we can start with questions, and I'm sure it'll kind of go into a conversation as it
Yeah,
goes.
for sure, definitely. So the one question I did have at the beginning was what kind of inspired you to go down the route of regulatory / medical writing?
I'll answer the medical writing part first. Overall, I kind of see regulatory as a subset of specialization within medical writing, where medical writing is the overall skill. I think that a lot of people will coin medical writing as a key skill within the pharma industry. And I think it really truly is that foundational skill that once you have sound experience in medical writing, once you're a good medical writer, you can understand kind of what goes on beyond that and then kind of grow from there. So I saw it as kind of the perfect place to start. And with entry level roles, I'm sure you've done some searching and some digging, and I'm sure you know that the titles are definitely different depending on, which side you're on, pharma versus agency, what department you're in, what company you're in, and the titles are never really the same. So what I found was looking for medical writing roles was kind of, I guess, the cheat to that, and it kind of led me to finding other roles as well. So that's kind of why I honed in specifically on medical writing, both because I saw it as a key skill, wanted to kind of have that to my name. And then also just because of that's where I saw the most entry level roles. Regulatory specifically, so I actually was looking to go into medical affairs or clinical development. Like most PharmDs, obviously the most amount of PharmDs are definitely in medical affairs. So all of my experiences until graduation was in medical affairs. And when I applied for fellowships, I applied in med affairs and clinical development as well. When I was looking for entry level roles, like I said, I was looking for medical writing. So this role, regulatory writing, I never really closed myself off to opportunities based on the title or what I think. It seemed like it was in the general realm of things. So I applied, and when I met with the people and interviewed, the role is actually, I would say, like 40% medical writing and 60% regulatory writing. And they kind of, again, like coincide. But because it had both, I thought that that would be a really good way to get experience, and regulatory experience is never wasted. It's always kind of good to have that knowledge. And if you can, I think people say, and you've probably heard this, med affairs, reg, and probably clinical development are great places to start, because you can take those skills anywhere throughout the pharma industry in whichever functional area. So putting those two things together in my brain, and along with, the team was great, the fit was great, and I liked the work that I'd be doing. All of those decisions combined kind of landed me where I am.
Okay, yeah, because I know medical writing is kind of a niche field, but it's a skill that is transferable to almost every domain within pharma. So that's why I was kind of interested in it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
kind of going off that, what are some of the hard skills you need in order to be a medical writer? I know it's not really the same as editorial, because I did some like editorial writing in college and stuff, but I know, like, how does that differ? Like, what type of skills do you need to know in order to be a good medical writer?
Yeah, definitely, of course, medical jargon, which I think is why, PharmDs are so well suited. I think that was the first thing I noticed when I had my internship. A lot of the stuff, I had no idea what was going on in terms of, this clinical trial or this set of data, but I could understand what the documents said. So it's like, okay, that's kind of the first step. And a PharmD definitely helps you with that, along with hopefully other experiences. In terms of other kind of hard skills that you can work on, the first would be, I would say, any um, type of GCP and ICH training. So those are the regulatory overall standards that documents are written by. So although that's regulatory specific, because that's a standard that's set kind of globally by all these regulatory agencies, so the FDA, EMA, Japan, et cetera, knowing that, of course, is important, and most other templates will be based on that order. So one way I did that between mid-year and applying for positions was, if you just search GCP ICH guidelines, there's a free online certification, possibly even through I forget what organization it is, that you can read up on online. So that's something that I would recommend at least getting familiar with, looking up, maybe looking at that quick quiz certification and just reading through it, and possibly adding it to your resume, because that gives that technical experience, and at least understanding of like the regulation side of it. The other thing is honestly just practicing. And I think with medical writing specifically, there are so many different types of medical writing. You can do, medical writing that's based within medical affairs. That's for your KOLs and your external information. You have regulatory writing, which is to, FDA, EMA, regulatory agencies. But you can also have blog writing. There are so many medical blogs out there. If you think about it, someone out there is writing those articles on WebMD, or those type of, like, not even just blogs, but professional medical websites. And so you could be writers for those. That could be a different type. And again, that's just one type. And there's so many that I haven't even, touched or thought about or spanned. So you can kind of get experience anywhere. So like you said, you have editorial experience, and you can definitely spin that in a way that shows that you have writing experience. So going forward, if that's not something you've done for your story overall, then definitely think to do that. I think any experience is helpful experience. While you're in school, I think maybe the easiest way to do that is get some research or some paper in with a professor. Because if you can get manuscript and or abstract writing kind of in your arsenal, that's a really good place to start, because that gives you obviously the medical background. You have to write it in an unbiased way, et cetera, et cetera. So actually writing that paper, if you can get in a position to do that, I think that would be helpful. And then other technical skills, one thing I want to mention is references. So in school, we're always taught to do references by hand, but there are really helpful softwares out there. One is called EndNote, which is by, now I'm forgetting, I think it's just Adobe, but that's paid. So we probably wouldn't have access as students, and that's probably why most schools don't have it. But there's other free ones. One's called Mendly, and there's another one that starts with an E, and it's basically this like extension that you can put on your Chrome, and it's also its own software. and it creates your references for you. So it's super cool. You choose like what style you want. So AMA, APA, and then you either drag in your, like if you already have the PDF of the paper, you drag it in. If you have the DOI number, you can do that. It basically just does all the work for you and puts it together. So I think that was something that I learned when I got on the job, and I was like, whoa, this exists. This is so like much better than what I was doing before. That's a technical skill example, but I think the rest is really just like you have to learn on the job, because there's no way to practice with fake data, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So I think those are great ways to get experience. And then if with whatever writing experience you have, put that together with, you know, your clinical background in pharmacy school and make your case for, hey, look, I have good writing skills, would be my approach.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, that's really good advice, because honestly, I've never even considered that aspect of it. So I'm really glad to get that insight.
Mhm.
Something else I wanted to ask was, how do you leverage the clinical knowledge that you gained in class and in rotations in your job right now?
All the time. I think more than the knowledge, because I will be the first to say that I don't remember everything. I probably have forgotten more than I remember in terms of exactly what we learned. But I think the biggest thing is the analytical thinking skills, and just knowing what to ask for. So, for example, a lot of the regulatory documents that I work on are, you know, INDs, or other such documents that basically have all this data that's going to the FDA. And it's all the data that you would need about a drug. So the PK data, PD data, tox data, you know, all those things. And I think it's very easy from where we come from in terms of training to understand, okay, like if I have the PK data, I must have the PD data somewhere. So it gives you that next level of thinking of like, there must be something else. I should go look for it. And then there comes the on the job part where you're like, okay, now who do I ask and where do I look and blah, blah, blah. So I think that critical thinking from a therapeutic point of view, and specifically a drug point of view, because that's what your product is extremely important, and not kind of honed on as much. And from the little time that I've had in the industry, I can definitely tell that, you know, we have professionals everywhere and subject matter experts and the different KOLs in their different communities. But every time I interact with the pharmacist in the industry, whether it's just through talking like this, networking, or on the job, they definitely do provide a different value. And I think it's on us as PharmDs to kind of take that with us. So I think the biggest thing there is just not only our clinical training, but specific to drugs. That's our product. So it's inevitable that pharmaceutical companies should hire PharmDs. Like we are literally the experts that they're looking for. And so I think we should, and you should, in your future experiences, really make sure to utilize that, because I think we do get that, even though we're taught from a very clinical point of view. I think that it's really useful in the industry.
Yeah, I've definitely also been told like to just hone in on all those clinical experiences, because they'll definitely get you far no matter where you go with that.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I'm just curious, for medical writing, do you hone in on a specific disease state like oncology, hepatology, any of that, or is it all kind of like a broad array that you
It
focus on?
it would depend on who you work for, basically. So my company is a CRO, and we only do ophthalmology. So all of our clients are in ophthalmology. So at work, that's all I do. But I am actually a freelance medical writer as well. And so there I span all different therapeutic areas. Overall, it would just depend on, of course, like what company you're working for and what agency you're working for. Most agencies aren't specialized like that, I think, or as different in being specialized to a disease state like ophthalmology. Most span at least a few, and then offer services for that. But it can really span. And you can choose to specialize. You can, I think, choose to be both broad and specialized depending. So I obviously chose to be specialized for now. But I think that's an option that you can more or less have for yourself.
Okay, yeah. I was kind of curious to see if it was similar to how MSLs are trained per disease state. So I know they can like move laterally to different disease states and get the training for that based on what they decide to pursue. So I was curious to see if medical writing was more or less the same, but it sounds like you can kind of weave around as much as you want for the most part. So that's really cool. I like that type of flexibility.
Yeah, I would say if you were to choose a certain type, I would maybe choose a certain type of medical writing and not hone in on therapeutic area. Just because of how things are broken up, I think that's structurally easy.
Okay.
But if you were to do like bigger sets like oncology, then of course that would make sense. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Cool. So I guess the next question was, I know you were offered a fellowship and you said you had declined it in order to go to that direct path to industry. What were some of the factors that you considered when making that decision?
Yeah. Like I mentioned in the panel, it's really important to think about yourself in the big scenario of things. And I know that sounds like that's the whole point, right? You're interviewing for you to be in that position. But honestly, I don't think any of us really think about ourselves in that situation. We're just so focused on getting that role. But that's definitely not how you should think about it. And to add to that story, I want to say even more. I was in a fellowship interview, and after she was done explaining the role and what the fellowship would entail, I realized that it was nothing like what I read about. I was not interested in it. And I told her straight up. I was like, okay, look, like I don't want to, it's been like 10 minutes. I don't see myself in this position. So instead of like wasting your time and my time, I just want to let you know. And that was that. I don't think anyone else would ever do that. But I think, again, like maybe that wasn't right of me to do. I will maybe never know. But I think that sometimes, especially pharmacy students, when it comes to fellowships and industry entry level roles, it's like just want to get whatever you can get. And that's the mindset almost everyone goes into at least mid-year with. And that is so wrong, because the worst thing you could do for yourself is go to a convention, virtual or in person, have it be crazy, have 3 days of back-to-back interviews. Your head is definitely not on straight at the end of that, and then make a decision for a position that you probably won't be happy in. So the factors that I really assessed were: one, financial. It's very obvious that it's 45-50K for a fellowship, 1 to 2 years. So I was just in a personal position where that did matter to me, and I wasn't gonna let it. That wasn't my only factor. So if that had been the only reason, I wouldn't have not taken the fellowship. But that was one factor. Um, of course, in terms of student loans, if you're in a fellowship, they're deferred versus if you start a job, obviously you have to start paying immediately. So that's one factor too, which, I had student loans, but some other people might not. So that's a factor that I also had to think about. Second, the position I got was at a very small company, and extremely small, and to the point where my second interview at mid-year was with the CEO. And it went great. Like we had a great conversation, great company. Their model is really different, and it's very unique from other pharmaceutical companies, but it was just a little too small for me, I think. Just being obviously my first role out of school, I wanted to make sure that I was setting myself up in an environment that was kind of conducive to not only a good job, but growth overall. And from what I assessed, and again, like in the 2 days that you have to assess, um, my gut feeling said that wasn't right. So I kind of went with my gut in that way. And also it was not I'm in the Boston area right now, and I'm originally from Colorado, and it was in neither of those places. And I had no problem at the time moving. But for me, it was just, I have this gut feeling that I shouldn't take it. And I have to move, to a whole new state and do all these new things. Is it really there was just so many factors to that I was assessing. And as you can tell, I do a lot with my side life. So that was another factor. I just didn't know if I wanted to move and pack up and go somewhere to start anew and have it impact other parts of my life. So that was overall kind of what I assessed. and why I decided not to go with it. But it was obviously risky. I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't get a job till June. And so it was a risk of having a position versus not. But I really just had a gut feeling and went with it.
Okay, that's really good to hear, because I don't know if you felt like this when you were in my year, P3 year, but like I feel like everybody who wants to do industry just so set on the fellowship, like they don't even consider like getting an entry level job right out of graduating. So I feel like, I don't know if I would say it's a stigma, but there's kind of a little stigma against not getting a fellowship. Like it seems like that's just one of the like the predominant path they want you to take, because they don't really talk about it in classes or anywhere else about the opportunities that just graduating and then getting a job straight in pharma has. So that's why like I feel like there's always just so much emphasis on that fellowship that it's like we're all like brainwashed into thinking like, oh, this is what we have to do. This is what will get us like to success.
Yeah, that's a
But yeah, no,
putting it. I think it's interesting because I've now just through my channel and the different panels, I feel like this has come up a lot more and I've just had to think about it. And I think pharmacy students are thinking about it backwards. Like pharma has existed for way longer than a fellowship has ever existed for. Like we have to realize that like the industry came, then pharmacists came, then PharmDs came. Like that is a new revolution, right? Last like 20 years. And now a fellowship has come. So is it wrong? No. Is it standard? No. So I think that it's like, and even just looking at the numbers, there's what, like 500 fellowships a year available. What kind of percentage is that? It's so unrealistic to think that that is the only way. So I think in that sense, like it's backward thinking. Can it be right for you? 100%, like 100%. And I think it really depends where you go, because some companies, now that fellowships are big, some companies are so fellowship driven that you can kind of tell, how they treat a fellow versus, let's just say, an employee or a contractor at the same level. But there are other companies who have never heard about a fellowship or who are just getting into it. So at those companies, you won't be undermined if you are just entry level. So I think that's one thing to consider. Many companies, again, like there are so many biotechs and pharmas out there that just have no idea what a fellowship is. So I think a balance of both, one where, a company knows what a PharmD is and what value a PharmD can bring, but also not be like, you must have a fellowship. I think that a balance of both would be an ideal place. But I agree with you. I think it's a brainwash that's not necessary.
yeah.
And all for like, I'm 100% for fellowships, and I hope I went to them, I applied, I did everything 100% for them. But I think, again, you have to assess if it's right for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely felt the pressure of wanting to do fellowship when I was scrolling through LinkedIn. I saw everyone saying like, I'm at Rutgers, I'm at Sanofi, like everything. I was like, oh gosh, like it's that season,
Yeah, no, it's a cult. It's a cult.
kind of, yeah.
It's not a bad thing. It's, again, it's a huge, I think pharmacy is shifting in general. Pharmacy as a career, as an industry, is shifting from brick and mortar to all these different other opportunities, one of which is industry, within which there's an opportunity of a fellowship. So that's a great opportunity. like that's allowing PharmDs to be in this space, and it's new and it's good for us. But yeah, I think that please don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Like I am a live example. So
that's why I wanted to talk to you, so you can just give me that good advice and that insight, because I feel like everywhere else is always just like, no, just do fellowship. So no, it's good to hear. That's like kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's refreshing to hear someone, kind of go the alternative route and still be successful. So
100%. And sometimes, and I found that the little nuances that people say, like, oh, when you're a fellow, like the second that you have fellow on your LinkedIn, you get all these recruiters reaching out and stuff. That happens regardless. Once you graduate, that happens. Like that's going to happen. So that's one thing that I kept hearing from fellows, which after I didn't after I didn't take a fellowship, and then after I started working, I was like, yeah, no, it's the same, so it just depends. But yeah.
exactly. Okay. And then another question I had was, what is your opinion on doing a residency post-graduation and then trying to break into industry after? Because I know there's quite a few pharmacists out there who've definitely pursued the residency route, worked in clinical for a few years, and then went to be MSLs or some other position in industry. What's your opinion on that?
It's not doable. Clearly, there are so many people who do it, but it's hard. So it's hard to get your foot in the door regardless. But it's gonna be harder every year you're removed from pharmacy school and you're not in the industry. And I have there's so many people who have reached out to me who are either in retail or hospital and want to come into the pharma industry, and they've been in their respective industries for years. And I'm not saying it's not doable, but I think that you have to really do that extra homework. So having that clinical background, definitely worth it. Is a residency going to help make you succeed in a possible MSL or industry role? 100% that background is necessary. But I don't think the process will be any easier. So if you are to pursue that route, know that residencies are killer. Like the amount, one of my friends specifically was the only interaction that I had mainly with a resident, and I was like, this is absolutely crazy. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind, is that 2 years that you're going to put in with that much work only to shift to industry. I don't think if you're going in with that mindset, I don't think it'd be worth it. I'd rather you struggle for the first 6 months, get into industry, and then work those 2 years and actually get industry experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think that would, again, if your end goal is industry, then I would say that makes more sense. But is it doable? 100%.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like when I was rotating at a hospital last semester, the resident I worked with said, "Oh, you should just do residency. It's not worth it. Like you'll be great. Like you can go into industry after." I'm like, is this like what kind of I don't know, advertising is this? I did not appeal to me because her hours were insane.
No, if you're going for that route, and if you're targeting, let's just say something like MSL, 2 years in pharma, even if it's in some other role, would help a lot more than I think going down that path, because I think residency, the way it's structured, you wouldn't have time to do your side, homework, keeping up with pharma news, networking, all of that stuff. You definitely wouldn't have time for that.
I know. I need that good work-life balance. So that's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Definitely. So another question I had was, what is the more upward mobility like when going straight into industry versus pursuing a fellowship? Like, are the trajectories similar, or do you believe that one route can get you to the top faster than the other?
100% equal, honestly, because I don't think any one guarantees. Of course, I think that when you go into a fellowship, the whole point is for you to be trained, for you to be exposed to high profile projects, for you to network, and for you to then grow from that. So at the end of the day, a fellowship really puts you in the environment that is conducive to your growth. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that environment and you're a person who got a fellowship anyway, you must be motivated and organized and all of that stuff. So all of those factors included will probably lead to success, right? That's just how it's set up. Can you do the same thing on the other side of things? 100%. And a live example of this was when I was at Celgene. Within the same department, we had one person who did a fellowship and one person who didn't. And they were the same year, graduated both from Rutgers. And it was their second year, and they both got promoted. I can't speak right now. They both got promoted to manager. And at the same time, actually, I think the entry level guy got it sooner. So example, at the same company, knew about fellowships, but it was a balanced view. So I think that also speaks to the company. Again, they weren't all like fellowship is the only way. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But I don't think it matters. I think it matters more on your initiative. So not stopping working hard when you're actually in the position. And I think, again, a fellowship kind of doesn't allow you to do that, whereas you might be able to do that in an entry level job. So don't do that. But second, I think it's very much so opportunity based. So a lot of times, I know a fellow who was in a fellowship, but then got hired on straight into associate director, which is insane. But again, because his boss was the associate director, there was no one in between. And then he left or got promoted or something, so that there was an opening, and it only made sense to promote the person inside. Opportunity. So again, things like that, I think, make much more of a difference, which is why I say it's more worthwhile to go in entry level than to maybe gather other experiences and try to come in another way. Because when you're in the space, you're kind of, if you're going to spend those 2 years, most likely in 2 years someone will leave from your team. So having that space and that opportunity, I think means a lot more than exactly what pathway you take.
Okay, yeah. No, that's good to hear, because I've also heard other people say, oh, like once you finish your fellowship, you'll be manager right away. But I'm like, I feel like no matter which route you take, you can get to that point. It doesn't really matter how soon either. So no,
Yeah,
that's good.
and I mean, and again, it can work both ways. For some people, it's really that step that they need, and for some, it's not. But in 2 years, you should become manager anyway, if that,
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, um, that's kind of how I saw it. So again, I heard that all the time, and I was like, yeah, but in 2 years in a regular job, like I would hope for a promotion anyway, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like, I think that these things that people keep throwing around, I'm just like, no, like we got to think a little more critically about this stuff.
I know you're out here exposing all these myths. I love it. All right. So I guess I have one more question for you.
Yep.
And so, as someone who's about to embark on their final year of pharmacy school starting in May, what advice do you have when it comes to navigating P4 year in general, whether it be anything about rotations, mid years, fellowships, etc.?
Do as much as you can. You're paying for your rotations. So keep that in mind. And I say that because squeeze as much as you can out of them. So, for instance, if you're excited, I mean, if you're interested in the pharma industry, and I just told you medical writing is great, woohoo, and you are interested in getting medical writing experience, what appies do you have lined up?
Oh, we have a bunch. We have Gen Med. Um,
Do you know what specifically, like where you are? And I guess more specifically, do you have an industry rotation?
I do. I have one at P&G in Cincinnati where I'm going to be working in scientific communications. So
Okay,
I know
awesome.
that's a
So,
repeat. Yeah.
okay, cool. So psychoms is 100%, medical writing experience, so that's good. But what I did was, because I knew I wanted to go into industry, and those 6 weeks at every other place other than industry, I was like, ugh, this is not what I know what I want to do. So what I did instead was kind of utilize each of those rotations and got something that I wanted out of it. So obviously you want to start early because you only have 5 or 6 weeks. But ask if it's a clinical rotation, ask if you can do a writing piece, whether it's a poster or presentation that preceptor is already working on, or something, because then that way you can, it's a lot of backwards thinking, but then that way you can place it on your resume and highlight the medical writing portions if you're going for that. You kind of have the time right now to think about that, and strategize, and then come backwards from that end goal, and maneuver that. And these teachers and these preceptors are 100% open and great to basically doing whatever it is you want to learn and do. So don't take away from the actual appy if it's a clinical or retail appy, but you can infuse that into it, and kind of get the experience and shape your own story through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's probably 100% a rotation or two that you're not, you want, or it's a requirement, like been there, done that, and will do the work. But if you can get something else out of it that kind of goes in line with your other goals better, then definitely utilize that, because again, you're paying for it. So
Exactly.
might as well.
Yeah, exactly. My friend definitely said you can spin anything you do in rotations toward industry in some way or another. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's the
exactly.
plan for
Yeah.
when it starts. But yeah, those are all the questions I had for you. I really appreciate that, like
It's
answering
fun.
everything truthfully.
Of
I
course.
like hearing it.
No, that's hopefully, again, like, I think people are always like, you should go to Whittier because it's craziness. And I was like, no, I'm not spending $700 to $1,000 just to come here and like observe craziness. Um, and then all these other, like you said, the myths. And of course, everything has truth to them. And I'm still all for fellowship. So whatever, you know, your path is and whatever your story shapes out to be, I think that you're on the path for success because you're attending all of these things, you're putting yourself forward. And from the communication that I've seen from you, and just our interaction, I think you're definitely setting yourself up well. But overall, like I guess our relationship can span outside of this. If you ever have any questions, let me know. I'm pretty fast at responding, so that might be the best, but down to get on a call at any point as well. And yeah, I hope that this is helpful. I think that, like you said, I think more people just need to talk about it and probably
Mhm.
so.
Exactly.
But
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
yeah.